My name is Margaret Allen, and I was 68 years old the night my world split in two. I'd been running my own small chain of textile shops for most of my life, and in that time I had survived a difficult marriage, the sudden death of my husband, and the constant weight of raising a daughter alone. I thought I knew hardship. I thought nothing could truly surprise me anymore. I was wrong. That evening began like countless family dinners before it. My daughter Laura had insisted on cooking. She wanted everything to feel warm and celebratory, she said. Just the three of us gathered around the oak table in my dining room. She had chosen to make chicken in a mushroom cream sauce, my favorite. The smell of roasted garlic and butter filled the air as I poured water into the glasses. For a moment, I felt something close to peace. But then a note of bitterness caught my nose. It was faint, almost hidden under the mushrooms and herbs, but sharp enough to stop me in my tracks. I watched Laura set the plate down in front of me, her smile tight, her eyes flickering as if she couldn't quite hold my gaze. My heart gave a small, uncertain thud. Something about that dish was wrong. I told myself I was imagining things. Years of being cautious with numbers and contracts had made me suspicious of everything. Maybe this was no different, but when I glanced at my son-in-law, David, I acted before I could second guess. With a steady hand, I slid my plate toward him and drew his in front of me, brushing it off with a laugh about wanting the one with more sauce. Laura froze. Just for a breath. Her face drained of color before she forced another smile and busied herself with her napkin. An hour later, David was on the floor. His skin had turned gray, his chest heaving with shallow breaths. The glass of water he had been drinking rolled from his hand and shattered on the hardwood. I stood there trembling, staring at my daughter, and for the first time in my life I was afraid of her. The faint, bitter smell from earlier still clung to the back of my throat. That was the moment I understood. The danger in my home had not come from strangers or from the outside world. It had been seated at my own table, smiling at me across the candles. 3 days before that dinner, Laura showed up at my shop just as I was closing the register. The winter light was fading through the front windows, and I could already feel the ache in my shoulders from standing all day. She came in with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, carrying a tote bag and talking fast, as if rehearsed. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something exciting," she said, pulling me toward the office in the back. She laid out papers across my desk, projections, charts, colorful brochures for what she called an expansion of her organic skincare line. I watched her hands tremble as she arranged the pages. "If I can get $200,000, she explained, "I'll be able to open a second location in Evanston. The demand is there, I promise. This is my chance to prove myself." Her voice had that pleading undertone I knew too well. Over the years, I had bailed her out of more than one failed idea, and every time I told myself it would be the last. Yet here she was again, older, but not wiser, still looking at me like the answer to all her problems. I leaned back in my chair and studied the documents. The numbers were glossy, too clean, growth charts that soared upward without a single dip, margins that any retailer would envy. After decades of running my own business, I had seen enough spreadsheets to know when something was dressed up to look better than it was. "Laura," I said gently, "these figures don't make sense. Real businesses have setbacks, fluctuations. Where did you get these?" She bristled, her lips tightening. "I worked hard on them. You always doubt me." Her words stung, but I didn't argue. Instead, I nodded and told her I would think about it. After she left, I sat in the silence of my office, staring at the brochures she had left behind. My gut told me something was off. It wasn't just the numbers. It was the desperation in her eyes, the way her smile slipped the second she thought I wasn't looking. That night, I called an old friend who still worked in accounting. I asked him to quietly look into Laura's business. The next afternoon, he called me back. His tone was grim. The store was drowning in debt, creditors already circling, and David's gambling losses had bled into their accounts. There was no expansion. There was only collapse. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the phone long after the call ended. My daughter hadn't come to me for help building a future. She had come because she was already sinking. For the first time, I realized that saying yes might not save her. It might destroy me too. So when Laura returned the following day, waiting for an answer, I looked her straight in the eye and told her no. Her expression hardened instantly, the mask slipping. "You'll regret this," she muttered before storming out. I didn't know how right she was. When David collapsed onto the floor that night, the sound of his chair scraping back and his glass shattering felt louder than anything I had ever heard. My heart slammed against my ribs as I rushed to his side. His eyes rolled back, his lips gray, and his chest barely rose with each shallow breath. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Call 911, I shouted, and Laura fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice before she managed to dial. I stayed kneeling beside David, pressing 2 fingers against his neck until I felt the faint flutter of a pulse. Relief mixed with terror. He was still alive, but something had poisoned him. The paramedics arrived quickly. They lifted David onto a stretcher, working with swift efficiency as they asked questions. I answered what I could, my voice steady on the surface but trembling inside. Laura hovered near the doorway, tears streaking her cheeks, whispering, "Please, please," as though praying would undo what had been done. After they carried him out, I stood in the silence of my dining room. The plate still steamed on the table, the candlelight flickering over the half-empty glasses of water. The smell of mushrooms and cream sauce clung to the air, mixed now with something bitter, something unnatural that lingered in the back of my throat. Laura turned to me, her face blotchy and pale. "Mom, I don't know what happened. Maybe he's allergic. Maybe it was the wine." Her excuses tumbled out in a rush, but her eyes refused to meet mine. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to. But the memory of her muttered words just days earlier, "You'll regret this," echoed inside me like a warning bell. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep under the same roof. I packed a small bag, told Laura I needed air, and walked across the street to Helen's house. Helen had been my neighbor for years, a widow with a warm laugh and a sharp sense of truth. She opened the door before I could even knock twice. One look at my face and she didn't ask questions. She simply wrapped me in her arms and said, "Come inside." Sitting in her living room, the hum of her old heater filling the silence, I finally let my composure crack. My hands shook as I told her what had happened, the smell I had noticed, the way Laura's smile faltered when I switched plates. Helen listened, her eyes steady on mine. "Margaret," she said softly, "you have to be careful. Love doesn't erase danger. Sometimes it blinds us to it." Her words cut deep because I knew she was right. I had spent years telling myself Laura just needed more chances, more patience, more time. But tonight had shown me something I could no longer ignore. As I lay awake on Helen's couch, staring at the ceiling, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I was afraid of my own daughter, and worse, I was starting to believe she might truly want me gone. The morning light streamed through Helen's curtains, thin and cold against my sleepless eyes. I hadn't closed them once through the night. Every time I drifted, I saw David's gray face and heard the thud of his body hitting the floor. by sunrise. My mind had settled on one truth I couldn't escape. I had to face Laura. I walked back across the street with my coat pulled tight. The house looked the same as always, roses climbing the porch rail, curtains drawn in the front windows, but it felt different, like a place I no longer belonged to. Inside. Laura sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. She jumped when I entered. "Mom," she said, her voice thin. "How's David? Did the hospital call?" "He's stable," I answered. My tone was flat, stripped of warmth. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock, loud and steady. Finally, I asked, "What did you put in that food, Laura?" Her face went white. The mug rattled against the table as her hands trembled. What are you talking about? Nothing. It must have been—" "Stop!" My voice cracked sharp, sharper than I intended. "Don't lie to me. I smelled it. I switched plates. That's why David is in the hospital, and I'm sitting here." Tears welled in her eyes, but her expression hardened all the same. She pressed both palms flat on the table, as if steadying herself. "I didn't mean for him to eat it," she whispered. My stomach twisted. "So you did put something in there?" She nodded once, then covered her face. "It was oleander. I read about it, how a small dose could stop a heart. I thought, if you were gone, the inheritance would solve everything. The debts, the store, all of it." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My own daughter had just confessed to trying to erase me, and the words came out as if she were explaining a failed recipe. "Laura," I said, my throat raw, "I have given you everything I could. I built a life so you would never have to struggle the way I did." "And this is what you decide to do?" She lifted her head, eyes blazing now, defiance sparking beneath the tears. "You were never going to help me. You care more about your company than me. You've always cared more about your work." The accusation cut deep, because somewhere inside me I wondered if she believed it, but nothing could excuse what she had done. In that moment, a line drew itself clear and final between us. Whatever bond we once had as mother and daughter was buried under her confession. I stood slowly, my chair scraping back. "This isn't just between us anymore," I told her. "You crossed a line that cannot be undone." Her sobs followed me down the hall. But I didn't turn back. I left the kitchen with my pulse hammering in my ears, every step heavy as if the floor itself wanted to hold me back. I climbed the stairs to Laura's room, my hands shaking as I pushed open the door. I told myself I needed proof, something more than her tearful confession, because deep down I knew she would deny it the second I called the police. The room smelled faintly of perfume and stale wine. Clothes were scattered across the floor, makeup palettes cracked open on the dresser. I opened drawers with trembling fingers, moving past scarves and notebooks until I reached the bottom one. There, tucked behind a stack of magazines, was a small glass jar with a pale powder inside. A sharp, bitter scent wafted up as I unscrewed the lid, and I nearly gagged. Oleander. My chest tightened as I set it down carefully, my mind spinning. I searched further, my eyes scanning every surface until I found a yellow notepad shoved under her pillow. Across the top page were 3 words written in her hurried scrawl: dinner, powder, will. My heart clenched. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the list as tears blurred my vision. I wanted to rip it apart, to throw it all away and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then I pictured David on the dining room floor, gasping for breath, and I knew I couldn't. With careful hands, I placed the jar and the notepad into a paper bag. I went to her desk, turned on her laptop, and there it was, Her search history, still open on the screen. Lethal dose oleander, inheritance laws, parent death. How long until poison works? Each line made my stomach sink deeper. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, my fingers stiff as stone. When I finally stepped back into the hall, Laura was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Her eyes were swollen, her arms crossed tight against her chest. "What are you doing in my room?" she demanded, her voice sharp but unsteady. I held the bag close to me. "Getting the truth," I said. "You gave me no choice." She rushed forward, reaching for the bag, but I pulled away. "Don't," I warned, my voice firmer than I felt. "It's over. Laura, you need help, but not the kind I can give." For a moment, we stared at each other. Two women bound by blood, yet divided by something much darker. Then I stepped past her, opened the front door, and walked straight out into the daylight. At the curb, I dialed the police. My voice barely trembled as I explained who I was, what I had found, and why they needed to come immediately. By the time the patrol cars pulled up, my hands had gone numb, but my resolve had never been clearer. I watched from the sidewalk as the officers entered my home. A part of me wanted to run inside, to shield Laura, to take back the call. But another part, the stronger part, knew this was the only way forward. The day of the arraignment came cold and gray, the kind of Chicago morning where the wind seemed to slice right through your coat. I walked into the courthouse with Helen by my side, her hand brushing mine in quiet support. The building's marble floors echoed under our footsteps, and for a moment I felt small, like a child being led somewhere I didn't want to go. Laura sat at the defense table when I entered the courtroom. Her hair was neatly brushed, her suit jacket pressed, as though the right clothes might erase the jar of poison, the handwritten list, the search history burned into evidence. She glanced up when the bailiff called the room to order, and our eyes met. For a second, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to cling to my leg on the first day of school. But then her expression hardened, and all I saw was a woman who had chosen betrayal over love. The prosecutor laid out the case with methodical precision. The confession, the photographs I had taken, the items seized from her room, each piece fell into place like the links of a chain, heavy and unbreakable. Laura's attorney tried to argue that it was all desperation, a cry for help, never a serious attempt. But the judge's face remained impassive, the evidence impossible to dismiss. When the question of bail arose, the prosecutor argued fiercely against it, citing the danger to me if Laura were released. The judge agreed. I heard the clink of the gavel and felt a chill of finality. Laura would remain in custody until trial. Weeks passed. The case moved faster than I expected, perhaps because the evidence was so overwhelming. By the time the trial began, whispers filled the courtroom each day, neighbors, reporters, strangers drawn to the spectacle of a daughter accused of poisoning her mother. On the third day, Laura's attorney approached me in the hallway. "She wants to take a plea," he said. 15 years in prison. With no possibility of contacting me, I nodded. It was not joy I felt, nor triumph. It was a weary relief, a door creaking closed at last. But before the deal was finalized, the judge allowed a statement from the victim, me. I stood, my legs trembling as I faced the room. Every pair of eyes seemed to press against me, but I forced myself to look only at Laura. My daughter tried to take my life. I began. My voice steady despite the weight in my chest. She believed that money could replace love, that inheritance could replace responsibility. For years, I gave her chance after chance, believing she would grow, believing she would see the truth. Instead, she chose to see me as an obstacle, not a mother. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I drew in a breath. my throat raw. I cannot carry that burden anymore. From this day forward, I am no longer her mother. I am a woman who survived, and I will keep surviving. Without her. A silence fell so deep I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above. The judge's gavel broke it at last. The plea deal accepted. The sentence sealed. 15 years. No contact. As the deputies led Laura away, she twisted once in their grip, her eyes burning into mine with something between fury and sorrow. But I didn't move. I didn't reach for her. I let her go. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt as though I had aged a lifetime in a matter of weeks. Yet somewhere beneath the exhaustion, a fragile thread of strength began to weave itself together. For the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of freedom. It has been a year since the trial, and the seasons have rolled past me like waves, each one washing a little more of the bitterness from my skin. I sold the last of my shops months ago, a decision that once would have terrified me. Those stores had been my identity, my pride. But after everything, I realized they were only brick and fabric. They couldn't keep me safe. They couldn't love me back. I moved into a small house on the edge of a quiet town, close enough to Helen that I can walk to her porch whenever I need company. She and I have built something steady, a friendship that feels more like kinship. We sit on her steps in the evenings, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea as the cicadas sing in the trees. She never asks about Laura, and I rarely bring her up, but sometimes, when the air is heavy and the silence deep, I let myself whisper the name of the daughter I lost, not to mourn, but to release. I spend my mornings volunteering at a shelter for women who have lived through violence in their own homes. They look at me with wide eyes when I tell them my story. Some of them gasp. Some of them cry. Most simply nod, because they know the shape of betrayal too well. Together, we share a quiet understanding. Survival is not the end of the story. Healing is... Every so often, a letter arrives from the prison, thick with Laura's handwriting. I never open them. By court order. I don't have to, but more than that, I choose not to. The words she writes cannot undo the poison she placed in that meal. My forgiveness is not a key she can use to unlock her freedom. That door belongs to her alone. Last week, Helen invited me for dinner. She roasted a simple chicken, seasoned with rosemary and lemon. Nothing fancy. When she set the plate in front of me, the steam curled into the air, warm and fragrant. I smiled. A real smile. Not the forced one I wore for so many years. For the first time, the smell of a family dinner did not fill me with dread. As we ate, I realized something. I may never have the family I once dreamed of, but I have found another kind of family in the people who stand beside me now. Blood may bind us, but choice defines us. Tonight, I sit at my kitchen table, the same way I did a year ago. The difference is that I am no longer waiting for betrayal to strike. I am breathing, living, and choosing my own peace. And for the first time in a long time, that is enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more everyday SSS.